DJ PK, and we're joined now by Cole Bagley. Covers the Utah Mammoth for KSL Sports. His appearance is brought to you by Hercules First Federal Credit Union, growing stronger together. Cole, good morning.
Good morning, fellas. How you doing?
Good. A week ago, you were on here, and we were talking about how 4 points in a 4-game road trip, especially against two division leaders and the Stanley Cup champs and team chasing the playoffs, that'd be a good road trip. Nobody wants to settle for good now, Cole. Give me very good or great. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think we talked, it may have been this show or with JJ and Alex, but that Nashville game was huge. You know, being able to beat a central division opponent to steal 2 points in a swing game, started things off right. And then, they didn't play bad against Tampa. It was still a really good game. They just met one of the best goaltenders in the world on the other end in Vasilevsky. But then to go into Florida on a back-to-back, to put in your backup goaltender, Vitek Vanacek, and then without Dylan Guenther, and of course, continuing to play without Logan Cooley and come out on top against the reigning champs. That was one of their best wins in the season. And, no matter what happens tonight, this road trip is a success. But, I know that the team is locked in, and, they'd like to finish the road trip with 5 or 6 points out of 8.
This is something that we'd all been anticipating and hoping for. And now that it's here, they're playing good hockey. We expect it the rest of the way to get their fair share of wins. And we're all thinking, that they will be in the postseason. Their stated goal will be achieved. But even with that in mind, even though we expected it, you don't take it lightly that we anticipated it, maybe not expected it. You don't take it lightly that it actually happened. What do you attribute this pretty good run to?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is maturity. After the win against Florida, I was able to ask, Sean Dursey about, hey, you guys have been playing, some really good hockey. There's obviously been growth, and then, and tonight demonstrated that. But in your opinion, how did this win demonstrate growth? And he said, look, the biggest thing for us is to have that next game mentality, and it's to make sure that we continue to play the same brand of hockey every single night. He said that along the course of the season, they knew all along what they needed to do, but there was too much talk and not enough action. Well, now they've been able to apply that action. And like I said, I think that demonstrates maturity. Last year they lacked a lot of maturity. They were unable to put together streaks like this, to win 7 games in a row, to get points out of 9 straight, and then to lose one, but then to get back on track and to win a couple more in a row. That's what it takes to be a great team in the National Hockey League. That's what it takes to make the playoffs in the National Hockey League. You can't allow yourselves to lose, 3, 4, 5 games in a row and then only win 1 or 2 and then go down the same path again. So, I think with the depth that they added in the offseason, adding, more experienced guys who had won Stanley Cups than H. Schmitz and, Vitek Vanaceks, and then as well to get full seasons for the most part out of guys that they added the previous year in John Marino, and then, of course, Sean Dursey this year has just paid, dividends for this team, and they're playing a lot more mature than they did a year ago.
Cole Bagley joining us, talking Utah Mammoth hockey. In basketball, a lot of people really hang on point differential and say, as things shake out, you follow point differential. And baseball people tell you run differential also. Do you believe that goal differential is a really good indicator of how things will break going forward? It's maybe you get a break here or there and win big or lose big, but it will really shake out. And I ask that because right now the Mammoth have the 3rd best goal differential in the Western Conference. So I'm wondering, are they just much better, and we're going to see them just keep charging through the rest of the schedule?
Yeah, I don't know about charging. It's tough to do what they're doing for the next, I think there's 29, 28 games left. But, I sat down with Bill Armstrong before the most recent homestands, before they had won 6 out of 7 and gotten points in all of those. And, we had kind of talked in depth about, what was going on. And, that was kind of before they had really corrected things. And, he had pointed out that, look, in a lot of key statistical areas, we're in the green. And obviously one of those is, goal differential. They're actually the only team in the Western Conference currently in the wild card race that has a positive goal differential. Not just positive, but they're plus 21. Every other team in the wild card race is in the red. And so, he had kind of talked to me and said, look, we've actually been playing pretty good hockey. We just haven't necessarily had puck luck. We've made a few mistakes during key moments, and they lost a lot of 1-goal games. Well, now, but at the same time, he said, look, if we can just continue to play the way that we are, eventually all those numbers in the green are going to catch up, and we're going to start winning some hockey games. And that's exactly what happened, right? They won 6 out of 7 at home. They've been really successful on this road trip. And so, again, I don't know that they're going to win 80% of the games down the stretch, but if they can win, 55 to 60% of what's left, that will nearly, if not for sure, guarantee that they make the postseason.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. How about the changes that the Bears made into lines? It seems like I shuffled some guys around, and that is another reason, along with that maturity that you say, as far as leading to the success. Could you speak on that?
Yeah, it's been a year where there's been a lot of line changes, and that's because this team was just trying to consistently figure it out. And when it comes to coaching, at the end of the day, they're not really going to change their scheme. But what the coach can do, the number one thing he can do is he can change up the lines, right? He can see if he can't get a spark on, all the lines or 2 of the lines or what have you. And so, the most recent changes that he was able to put together, I think have yielded these results. Putting Lawson Krause up on that top line of Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller, that added physicality, that added net front presence has really allowed those 3 to thrive together, because, Schmaltz and Keller are more of kind of facilitators, and they work really well together, but they're not necessarily always driving towards the net. They're not big bodies. But then you get, a big rig like Lawson Krause in there, who's about 6'3", 6'4", and he has done a magnificent job at getting in front of the net, crowding the crease, battling in the dirty areas, and helping that line to reload. And then you go down from there, that second and third lines, first, when they first changed them, when they dropped Gunther to the third and they put Daniil Boot up to the second, there was kind of a lot of questioning, not only from the fans, but kind of throughout the league when people started to see that. I remember when I tweeted it out that people were like, oh, what's going on in Utah? It's a shame that Dylan Gunther has to play outside the top 6. But again, it was a stroke of brilliance because, when Bear explained it, and I even talked to Gunther about it, and they weren't really concerned about top 6. It didn't matter who was on the second, who was on the third. This team just wanted to win hockey games. And so to have that attitude, for Gunther to have that attitude to drop down, down to the third, but he was playing with Jack McBain. And again, there was some brilliance there because that second line, which is Gunther, Hayton, and Peterka, lacked physicality. They lacked size. Well, then you switch Boot up to that second. You gave that line exactly what they needed. And the same thing with the third. It was Carcone, McBain, and Boot, a little bit, not too much physicality, but not enough speed, not enough creativity. Well, you dropped Gunther down there, and that's exactly what he's done. So, it was just a combination of games that really complement each other, and I think that has yielded these incredible results over the last month.
Isn't it also true that the head coach can control? I mean, there are chances starting into periods and you get the TV timeouts in the middle of stoppage where you can slide more ice time to the top 6. But if you've truly got depth all the way across the 3 lines, if the coach deploys the guys a little differently over the course of the game, can't you wear people down and create some really good matchups because everybody's got to play the third line at some point, and you make sure no matter when they do it, you have a strong line out there against them?
Yeah, I mean, I think Utah takes pride in all of their lines, being formidable opponents on the ice. Your third line is definitely going to be more of your checking line, but then, you add Gunther to it, and suddenly they're not just, suffocating you on the forecheck, but, they're also putting dangerous opportunities on your net. So, yeah, I mean, the coach definitely has the ability to do that, and, he's always, no matter who it is in the NHL, that, the coach is going to be strategic in who's on the ice at what time. And, I mean, a lot of times your third line is going to get, quality minutes, against the top or second line of the other team, because that's exactly what they're trying to do, is wear those guys down.
What do they do when Cooley comes back?
That's a good question, because this team is just playing so well. But I think, Cooley he's a top 6 type guy. But where do you slot him? Do you replace Barrett Hayton on the second line with Logan Cooley, but then you're faced with the decision of, well, where do you put Barrett Hayton? Because you're not going to take Lawson Krause off the top line because he's playing so well with Keller and Schmaltz. You're not going to take Jack McVeigh off the third line, and you're not going to take Evan Stemlin off the fourth. Like, those guys have just played so well in those positions. So it's going to be tough. I would. If I had to guess, I'd probably say that they slot him into the top 6, probably on the second line. I think it would make the most sense for him to then center that line. But luckily, I don't have to make those decisions, and we'll see what Bear ends up doing.
Well, it's just 4 games now in 8 days before we hit the 3-week Olympic break. So have you circled February 25, Colorado, the return to action for the team after the Olympics, as Cooley's return from injury?
Yeah, I think at this point, there's really no reason to bring him back before the Olympics. Again, going back to that conversation I had with Bill Armstrong a couple of weeks ago, he kind of broadened Cooley's return table to, he said he could come back either before or after the Olympics. And I think the reason that he said that was, in case things weren't going, really the way that they had envisioned or hoped is, if you start to get into some trouble, if you start to kind of bleed points and you're not in the standings exactly where you want to be, you probably rush Cooley back a little bit early to try to help things out, to try to, right the ship. But the way that they've played, over the last month, and especially on this road trip, picking up four points, it's already a success. We'll see what happens tonight. But, in my mind, there's really no reason to bring him back until after the Olympic break because if you do that, you give him a full almost 12 weeks to get healthy. And, even though the NHL technically takes a 2.5 week break, the players that are not participating in the Olympics, they're only getting about a week off, and then the team will return and they'll do almost kind of like a mini little training camp. And so that to me is when it would make the most sense to bring Cooley back, to give him about a week and a half to reacclimate, to get with the guys, to go through some practices. But that doesn't mean that something else couldn't happen. It's the National Hockey League, and as Bill Armstrong has told me, in this league, it's to expect the unexpected. So we'll see. But like I said, I wouldn't anticipate that we see him until after the Olympics.
We know Vejmelka's the guy on the back end. How comfortable are you with the depth there?
In Vanacek?
Yeah.
It's been an interesting season for Vitek. I like that Utah only signed their backup to a 1-year deal because it was kind of a contract that goes, all right, we're going to give you a chance now, prove it to us. And I don't know that it's necessarily gone the way that has put Vanacek in a position that that they're going to bring him back this next season. But to his credit, he has been put. I think his record right now is 2-9-2.
3-9-2 with that win. 3-9-2.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
3-9-2. He lost 10 games in a row. But again, I don't know that. I'd say that only half of those, or maybe 4 of those, were really his fault. A lot of his appearances kind of fell on back-to-backs or circled losses, and nights where the team just kind of really let him down. But the other night you saw what he can be capable of. The way, if the defense in front of him is playing the way that they should. And to be honest, 2 of those goals against Florida were definitely on the defense, as Ian Cole, gave up a turnover right in the low slot, and then Sean Dursey lost the puck near the net as well. So I don't know. It's tough. He hasn't obviously produced the way that you'd hope a backup would. But I don't know that it's completely and entirely his fault, as he hasn't played much. And again, his appearances have fallen on just bad nights, off nights, back-to-backs. With that being said, if this team does make the postseason, I would anticipate that Vejmelka is going to play the vast majority, if not all of those games, once they enter the playoffs.
His goals against average is 2.93, and his save percentage is about 88.5. Is that good enough for a backup? Where should a backup goaltender's numbers be for those areas?
Yeah, usually you want to see him into like the 8-9s. That's going to give you a really good chance to rip off wins when you have to put your backup goaltender in. His save percentage isn't terrible, nor is his goals against, but it's the fact that, he's only won 3 out of, 16 games, 15 games. That's where it's tough, is he just hasn't fully stepped up in those moments where, hey, you would hope that he's at least winning 50% of his games if he's going to play that few.
Yeah. In that streak you talk about, though, they lost to Colorado. They lost in Denver. They lost 1-0 to certainly the best team in the West and arguably the best team in the league. Maybe they fattened up against a Western Conference that doesn't have as much depth. But either way, in a 2-0 shutout loss in Calgary, there were chances where he played well enough and they defended well enough to break the streak. But this last win is the first time that he's played in a game where they scored 4 goals.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said. Like, I just don't think that I'd say half of those losses were probably on him and the other half just weren't. That 1-goal loss to Colorado, you couldn't have asked for anything more. He gave you every chance in that game, to win it. But if you can't score goals, it doesn't matter how good your goalie plays. If you can't put the puck in the back of the net, you're not going to win those. So, yeah, he's had good flashes. I do think he is a good goaltender, but he just hasn't really found his stride. And maybe this win against Florida will do that. That's his former team. He won a Stanley Cup with them a year ago. And, a lot of the guys had commented that they really wanted to win that game for him, to help him get it done. And he was really happy the other night. So, sometimes all it takes is to get a win when you really need one, and then you can get into a stride.
Well, Cole, we appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Thanks, fellas.
There's Cole Bagley joining us to talk about the Utah Mammoth, trying to close out with a 3rd win on this 4-game road trip. They'll be at Carolina tomorrow night. The puck drops at 5 o'clock right here on The Zone. DJ and PK coming up top of the hour. Matt Tate covers the Kansas Jayhawks. They're playing BYU, battling nationally ranked teams. A big game in the Big 12 Saturday afternoon. We'll talk with Matt about that at the top of the hour. Stay with us.